My neighbor tried to have my Chihuahua declared dangerous, but the security camera caught him faking an attack. I, 34M, never thought I'd find myself in a courtroom because of my 8-pound Chihuahua, but here we are. It all started 3 months ago when new neighbors moved in next door. At first, everything seemed fine. They were polite during our first meeting, complimented my lawn, and even brought over some cookies as a neighborly gesture. I thought we'd get along great. My dog, a tiny Chihuahua I rescued 2 years ago, is the least threatening animal you can imagine. She's more likely to hide under a blanket during a thunderstorm than bark at strangers. She's basically a furry potato with legs that trembles at her own shadow. But apparently, my new neighbor didn't see it that way. About a week after they moved in, I was in my front yard with my dog. She was on a leash, sniffing around the grass while I trimmed some bushes. The neighbor's kid, probably around 10 years old, came running over to pet her. I didn't see any problem with this, so I let him approach. My dog, being her usual self, wagged her tail and let the kid pet her. No issues whatsoever. Later that day, there was an aggressive knock at my door. I opened it to find my neighbor standing there, face red with anger. "Your dog almost attacked my son," he shouted before I could even say hello. I was confused. My Chihuahua? She wouldn't hurt a fly. He came home crying, saying your beast lunged at him. "I won't have my family threatened by your dangerous animal." I tried to explain that there must have been a misunderstanding. The kid had petted my dog without incident just hours earlier. But my neighbor wasn't having it. "Keep that monster away from my family, or there will be consequences," he threatened before storming off. I stood at my door, stunned and confused. I replayed the interaction between my dog and the kid in my head several times, but couldn't think of anything that could have been misconstrued as aggressive behavior. My dog had been perfectly calm. The next few weeks were tense. Whenever I'd take my dog out for a walk, I'd see the neighbor watching from his window. If we happened to be outside at the same time, he'd usher his family back inside, as if I was walking a lion instead of a trembling Chihuahua that weighs less than a gallon of milk. Then came the letter. A formal notice claiming my dangerous animal had aggressively threatened his child, demanding I get rid of the dog or face legal action. The letter mentioned something about establishing a legal precedent and dangerous animal ordinances. I wasn't about to give up my dog over what was clearly a fabrication, so I ignored it. Big mistake. 2 days later, animal control showed up at my house. The neighbor had filed a complaint saying my dog had attempted to bite his child. The animal control officer was understanding after seeing my vicious beast cowering behind my legs, but explained they had to follow up on all complaints. I was issued a warning and told that further complaints could result in my dog being seized for evaluation. This was getting ridiculous. After the animal control visit, I decided to install security cameras covering my front and backyard. I had a feeling things might escalate, and I wanted evidence if they did. Smart move on my part, because escalate they did. The following weekend, I was grilling in my backyard when I heard screaming from the neighbor's yard. I rushed to the fence to see what was happening, only to find my neighbor pointing at my dog, who was lying in the sun several feet away from the fence, and yelling that she had tried to attack him through a gap in the fence. I checked the footage later. It clearly showed my dog hadn't moved from her sunny spot, not even when the neighbor started yelling. She just lifted her head, looked in his direction, then went back to sunbathing. The next day, I received a summons. My neighbor was taking me to court, suing for emotional distress and demanding my dog be declared dangerous and removed from the neighborhood. The complaint described my Chihuahua as a vicious, aggressive animal that has repeatedly attempted to attack family members. It claimed the dog had lunged through fence openings and terrorized their child to the point where he was afraid to play in his own yard. I was furious, but also a bit relieved. This would finally be settled by someone rational. I gathered all my security footage, collected statements from other neighbors who had interacted with my dog, and even got a letter from our vet attesting to her gentle temperament. I also learned that my neighbor had made similar complaints about pets in his previous neighborhood. This wasn't his first rodeo. The day of the hearing arrived. My neighbor showed up with what appeared to be a hastily made arm sling and claimed my dog had somehow managed to bite him through the fence, despite being a tenth of his size and unable to fit her head through the slats. He had no medical records to support his injury claim, just a dramatic story about being mauled by my attacked dog. When it was my turn, I simply asked if I could present my evidence. I showed the security footage from the day he claimed to be bitten. It clearly showed him approaching the fence, looking around to make sure no one was watching, then staging a fake attack, complete with screaming and grabbing his arm. What's more, the footage showed that my dog wasn't even in the yard at the time. She was inside the house with me, visible through the patio door. The judge's expression went from serious to incredulous as she watched. Then she did something I didn't expect. She started laughing. Not just a chuckle, but full on, had to compose herself laughter. Let me get this straight, she finally said after regaining her composure. You're claiming this man's Chihuahua, which wasn't even outside at the time, somehow phased through a solid door, bit you through a fence it couldn't possibly fit through, then teleported back inside? Is that your testimony? My neighbor's face turned several shades of red. He started stammering about camera angles and timestamps being wrong, but it was too late. The judge had seen enough. Not only did she dismiss the case, but she also ordered my neighbor to pay my legal fees and issued a stern warning about filing false reports. She even suggested that what he did could be considered perjury and that further false claims could result in criminal charges. The icing on the cake? As we were leaving the courtroom, another resident from our neighborhood approached me. Turns out, my neighbor had tried the exact same stunt with their corgi last year in their previous neighborhood. They'd moved after losing that case too. It's been 2 weeks since the hearing, and things have been blissfully quiet. My neighbor avoids eye contact when we happen to be outside at the same time. I've heard from another neighbor that they're already talking about moving again. As for my dangerous Chihuahua, she remains blissfully unaware of her brief legal troubles and continues to live her best life, sleeping 18 hours a day, trembling at her own farts, and being absolutely terrified of the squirrel that visits our bird feeder. I've learned a valuable lesson about the importance of documentation and security cameras. But mostly, I've learned that some people will go to absurd lengths to create drama where none exists. At least this story gave the judge a good laugh. Edit. Wow, I didn't expect this post to blow up like it did. Thanks for all the supportive comments. To answer some common questions. 1. Yes, I still have the security system up and running. Not taking any chances. 2. No, I haven't spoken directly to the neighbor since the court date. We've maintained a mutual distance. 3. For those asking about dog tax, I'm not comfortable sharing photos of my pup online, but imagine the most stereotypical trembling Chihuahua, and you've got the picture. 4. Several people have asked why the neighbor targeted me. Based on conversations with other neighbors, it seems they've done this before to try and get money from settlements. They apparently succeeded once with an elderly neighbor who couldn't fight back in court. 5. And yes, I've given my furry little monster extra treats for enduring this ordeal with such bravery. She's currently terrifying the household by, checks notes, sleeping upside down on the couch with her tongue sticking out.